Hey, welcome back. I'm late releasing this video. I got sick. And if I make as many videos as I plan to make about this crazy life of mine, you'll see that being sick is a common theme. It wasn't until last year in which I found out why this is the case, but that's a topic for a whole nother video. This is episode 2 in a series about stories from my life. And if you haven't seen the first video yet, stop and go watch that one. Nah, really doesn't matter. But do go watch it at some point. Now the title of this episode really should be called Kids Are F***ing Stupid.
The host of this show swears like a drunken sailor on shore leave. Please don't be offended by his foul mouth. The word he uses rhymes with yuck.
Well, they are. I know I did some really stupid when I was a kid. Hell, I still do stupid as an adult.
Once again, the host is unable to contain his foul, dirty mouth. You have our sincerest apologies. The word he used this time is like the word hit, but with an S at the beginning. Thank you for your patience.
I also have 2 kids of my own, and well, oh boy, have they done some stupid as well.
Your host has once again let his dirty mouth...
The previous censor for this video has been sacked. Get over yourself. Your ears won't bleed if they hear a naughty word, but YouTube just might explode. It's the 21st century, folks. Why so serious?
Anyway, they're stupid. Not just my kids, all kids. And if you've ever been around kids long enough, you know this. They're stupid, and they do stupid.
I'm just gonna censor the offending words. If you can't figure them out, then you're an innocent human being, and we should all aspire to be just like you.
I'm going to show you how my brother and I were really stupid as kids, and how that stupidity had consequences, and how those consequences have significant impact upon your life. So let's get into this. My name is Christopher, Mr. Moffat if you're nasty, and this is a well-lived life.
You're exhausting.
I never liked KFC when I was a kid, and I still dislike it today. We ate Brown's Chicken growing up, which was the local fried chicken chain that started way back in 1949. And it was good chicken. But once Popeyes moved into the area, I was hooked on that tasty Cajun chicken. To quote the great Dr. John,
"Love that chicken from Popeyes."
The host in no way endorses nor is he sponsored by Popeye's Chicken. He just really, really loves that chicken from Popeye's.
hey, you're back. I thought you got sacked.
'Twas but a flesh wound.
Brown's Chicken used to have a lot of stores in the Chicago area, but a mass killing at one of their locations in 1993 led to a significant drop in sales and a closure of many stores. Apparently, mass murder is bad for business. 7 people were killed, which included both owners and 5 employees. It took the police over 9 years before making an arrest. Both perpetrators were eventually convicted and are serving life sentences. Horrible, horrible stuff. And yet, I'd still take Brown's Chicken over Chick-fil-A because Chick-fil-A's chicken is made with hate. First time I ever had Chick-fil-A was my senior year of college living in Daytona Beach. They had a restaurant in the mall there, and I decided to give this place a shot that I'd never heard of before. Well, I got my sandwich, and I took the bun off the top to put some sauce on. And there it was, sitting right on top of the fried chicken, a big clump of fried hair. Oh, God, it still makes me want to retch to this day. Oh, it was a very long time before I tried Chick-fil-A again, and I refuse to eat it currently. Again, because they make their chicken with hate. Now, my first video, I talked about what I considered my childhood home, the house we lived at on the 2200 block of North Narragansett. But that was my 4th actual home. When you're poor, you move around a lot, always trying to find a cheaper place to live since housing is usually your largest expense. Now, being poor is relative. We weren't homeless, and we weren't going hungry. So no matter how bad you have it, there's always someone who has it worse. And yes, I understand that we didn't have it as bad as many others. But if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, and you had one of these in your refrigerator, you were probably poor. Most of you probably had Kool-Aid or some other sugary drink in there. And let me tell you, if that was you, y'all were living large. We had reconstituted powdered milk in ours. In my book, that's poor. We also ate instant mashed potatoes. You know those dry flakes out of a box? Well, maybe you don't know. And if that's you, you're lucky. Those potatoes are gross. And margarine? I hate margarine. I loved Thanksgiving growing up because I knew I'd get real mashed potatoes and real butter for a change. What a difference. My mom is a very picky eater. She won't eat seafood, and she only likes certain vegetables. So the vegetables she liked were the only ones I was exposed to growing up, and it wasn't a very large selection. And to make matters worse, all the vegetables we did eat growing up were canned. Canned vegetables are disgusting, and I hated them. I grew up absolutely hating peas and green beans. The color of those is disgusting, and they're just mushy and revolting. But the food I hated most growing up was mushrooms. Mushrooms from a can are slimy, the texture is yucky, and the color is gray. I truly believe only two vegetables are acceptable from a can: corn and tomatoes. That's it. We never had broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, peppers, or spinach. Fresh herbs? Ha! Forget about it. It wasn't until I was living on my own that I was exposed to those things. And they're all so good. But it took me a while to get over the trauma of peas and green beans, and especially mushrooms. But fresh green beans and peas are amazing. Hell, even the frozen version is streets ahead from their canned counterparts. Now mushrooms though, oh mushrooms, I'm so sorry. I went the majority of my life denying myself of these absolutely tasty food items. And there's such a crazy wide variety of them. I was really missing out. Sorry, went off on a tangent talking about being poor, and then a tangent from that talking about food. Sorry, I really love food and I get very passionate about it. But try different foods. You never know what you might like. And if you let your kids try different stuff, they may like something you don't. Now, back on track. My first home was on the 3300 block of North Keystone. I was only there for about 6 months and I have zero recollection of that place. Now my second home was on the 3200 block of North Monticello, and Monticello is how we pronounce it in Chicago. I also have no recollection of this place either, but I do have two reminders. The toddler version of me had this inchworm. It was a toy from Hasbro.
Hasbro nor Inchworm are paid advertisers for this program.
Inchworm. Inchworm. You gotta know. Your kids will love it everywhere they go. Inchworm, inchworm. I'm telling you true. Writing it is fun to do. Inchworm, I love you. You're my friend, Inchworm.
Your kids will love riding up and down on Inchworm from Hasbro Preschool.
That little girl really loved her inchworm. I can neither confirm nor deny if I ever made out with my inchworm. What did happen though was scarring. Apparently the sidewalk in front of our house was broken and cracked. This caused the inchworm to not roll smoothly on the concrete, causing me to lurch forward and continually hit my chin on that little inchworm guy's hat. I still have the scar from it on my chin. Sadly, not as cool a story as how the Indiana Jones got the scar on his chin, though no inchworms were harmed in the process. The other event, however, was even more scarring. We had a space heater for warmth. Poor people problems. I'm told I was crawling around and saw it. It was glowing red hot, and I apparently said, "Pretty," and put my hand flat on the surface of the space heater. Well, wah! I was rushed to the ER. They had to individually wrap each of my fingers with gauze because they were afraid that my fingers would fuse together while they were healing. I still have that scar as well. Like I said, kids are stupid. Though, after almost 50 years, it has faded considerably. It used to be much worse than it is today. I've always scarred pretty well. The third home I ever had was on the 3400 block of North Albany. That house and the time I spent there will be the focus of most of this video. In researching this video, I realized I've lived a good portion of my life between Belmont Avenue and Addison Street on the north side of Chicago. That includes 4 different residences. Just this narrow band within the city. Kind of weird. We lived in the Avondale neighborhood of Chicago, on Albany, just south of Elston. Elston being one of the various diagonal streets in Chicago. Chicago's streets, almost in their entirety, are perfectly aligned on a grid exactly in line with the cardinal directions. In fact, it has been shown that Chicago's grid is the most perfectly aligned grid in the world. And with Chicago being as flat as it is, the grid persists throughout much of the city with very few breaks, those diagonal streets being some of the few exceptions. Currently on the corner of Albany and Elston is a great Irish pub named Chief O'Neill's. Francis Chief O'Neill was a Chicago police officer who eventually rose through the ranks to become the police chief. He served in this capacity for roughly 4 years at the beginning of the last century. More importantly, he was a musician and a collector of traditional Irish folk music, eventually publishing much of the works he had collected, thus preserving it. On Sundays, you can hear some of this traditional Irish folk music here at Chief O'Neill's. It's kind of like stepping back in time. Across from Chief O'Neill's, in that abandoned storefront, was a local sub shop when I was a kid. It's where I found my love for Chicago-style sub sandwiches and my first introduction to arcade video games. I remember playing Asteroids in there, among many other early arcade games. Across from our house growing up was some kind of auto shop. At least that's how I remember it. However, I do remember it vividly burning down. We lived in this house on Albany, which is looking much nicer than when we lived there. We lived there from 1979 until sometime in 1983. I don't remember the exact dates, but I was about 4 through 7 while living there. Now, this house on Albany was owned by my great-grandfather, my father's grandfather on his mother's side. He lived in a little apartment in my grandmother's house in the basement. He loved to smoke cigars, and that's what eventually did him in, dying from tongue and throat cancer sometime in the early 80s. Oh, and he only had one leg, and would keep the prosthetic one behind the door in the spare bedroom. It used to freak me out. My great-grandfather apparently owed a bunch of property in and around Chicago, this house being one of them. He leased it out to my parents. There was a separate apartment above us, and it would be rented out at various times while we were living there, and other times it was vacant. When it was vacant, my brother and I would sneak up there and just goof around, getting into all sorts of mischief. The story I've been told, and of course I don't know if it's true, was that my parents would inherit this house when my great-grandfather died. Well, when he died, that did not happen. The house went to my dad's mom. Now, my mom and my dad's mom did not get along. My parents were married in April of '73, and my brother was born in October of the same year. You do the math. I came along in '75, also an accident. So when my parents didn't inherit the house, well, that relationship went from cold to absolutely frozen. My brother and I called my dad's mom Grandma Fricker, to distinguish her from my mom's mom, who was just simply Grandma. I asked my mom recently about why we called her Grandma Fricker. She says she has no recollection of this. So here's my theory for the origin story of Grandma Fricker. My parents used to argue a lot. Now, my dad was a world-class screamer. If there were an Olympic event in screaming, my dad would have won multiple gold medals from multiple Olympics. And the usual topic for their arguments was, of course, money, or more importantly, the lack thereof. I'm pretty sure after not inheriting the house, there were probably many, many arguments about that situation. I figure it went down something like this. I'm sure they were arguing about my grandma, and one of them probably called her Grandma. And we, probably overhearing this, and being dumb kids, as all kids are, probably ran around yelling, Grandma, Grandma, Grandma. And to save face, my mom probably told us that what she said was Grandma Fricker. And so, the villain Grandma Fricker was born. My brother and I would call this to her face, no cap. I threw that in there just to make the kids cringe. Anyway, I've always wondered what she thought of that particular title. But like I said earlier, kids are stupid. You know what? I originally wanted to title this episode that, but figured it wasn't a great title. But screw it, I'm changing the name of the episode to it. No one can stop me. After all, this is my show. Yeah, that's totally more appropriate. Anyway, moving on down the block. There used to be a raised railroad that ran through the block. It was a spur line of the Union Pacific that serviced the Commonwealth Edison power plant that used to be along the north branch of the Chicago River in Addison Street. There's still a power substation there, but the power plant is long gone, being gone even while we lived there over 40 years ago. Because the power plant was gone, that spur line wasn't used. My brother and I, along with all the neighborhood kids, would play up there on those tracks, getting in all sorts of mischief. Although the spur line is gone now, there are still some remnants of it remaining. Here you can see some old rail and ties in the parking lot of the fire station nearby. And this is what remains of the viaduct that crossed both Whipple Street and Elston Avenue, and what remains of the embankment. And we'd also play in the viaduct underneath the tracks, usually throwing a ball against the wall and trying to catch it. A common ball game among kids in Chicago was called 500. One person would throw a rubber ball against the wall, and the others would fight to catch it. Catching it on the fly would get you 100 points. One bounce was 50 points, and 2 bounces was 25 points. No points after that. Once you got 500 points, you got to be the person to throw the ball against the wall. You find simple ways to amuse yourself when you're a kid. At the end of the block on Elston was the Elston Play Lot. I would go here a lot as a kid, usually barefoot through the alley. It had all the typical 80s equipment, monkey bars, swings, slides, and a sandbox. There was a legend of a kid that swung all the way around on the swings. I tried to do it once, but freaked out when the chain on the swing went slack, and then slammed taut again. I'm pretty sure that was just a legend, though. I had to come back in the winter to shoot this video. I didn't want to be the creepy old guy shooting video of kids in the summer. I brought my son with me too, so I would look less conspicuous.
It's not possible.
Going south on Albany to Roscoe Street, and then going west one block to Troy Street, there was a corner store. These were quite common among the Chicago neighborhoods back in the day. You could usually get essential groceries like eggs, milk, bread, and the like. We loved it because that's where you could get candy and baseball cards. And back then they had lots of candy you could buy for a penny, along with the name brand candy bars that were only a quarter. You know, when change was actually worth something. Back to Albany and south of Roscoe was the block my friend Shane lived on. I had 2 really good friends while I was living in the Avondale neighborhood, Shane and Tony. Back then, when your parents moved out of a neighborhood, it was very difficult to stay in touch with the other kids that you had befriended. You know, we didn't have social media and cell phones back in the day. I would have liked to have stayed in touch with Tony, but I wasn't sad to have lost touch with Shane. Shane and I would play in the play lot, in the front of his house, or at my house. I only went inside his house once. It smelled funky, and I didn't want to go in there again. One day he was playing at our house, and then he said he was going to go home, and he left out the back, which wasn't unusual since we were also on the same alley. At least, I thought he had left. At that time, my dad had his hobby room in the back, which you had to go through to leave to go out the back of the house. My dad was an amateur historian and really focused on military history. Books upon books upon books of military history, battles, tactics, etc. He read a lot. His favorite era was definitely the Napoleonic period in Europe, but he studied all the way back to the ancient Greeks and all the way up to the present day. He and his friends would get together and do what was called wargaming. My dad had a huge table in the basement. Actually, it was just a huge panel of wood on 2 sawhorses. They would refight these famous battles throughout history, with rules and miniatures. They had all the armies, hills, trees, and houses. It was pretty impressive and amazing to a 7-year-old. My father was a well-regarded miniature painter, having won many awards for his work, and painting miniatures for his friends became a side hustle for him. He and his friends also did role-playing games, with Dungeons & Dragons being the most popular. He had figures for all their characters, a paladin, ranger, barbarian, wizard, fighter, cleric, and a thief. So after a bit I noticed that I didn't hear the back door open and close, so I went back to my dad's hobby room to see what was up. And there was Shane, stealing my dad's miniatures. I managed to get him to drop the paladin, and then he ran off. I wasn't friends with him after that, and I had to tell my dad that one of my friends had stolen some of his stuff. Ironically, Shane the thief had stolen the thief. Moving along south again on Albany, you come to School Street, My brother and I, like I mentioned in my previous video, were true Gen X latchkey kids. We went to and from school on our own. At 6, I walked to school with my brother alone, who was only 20 months older than me. This was the way we walked to school, and we would turn left on School Street and head east. Now as a kid, I thought all schools were on School Street. It just seemed to make sense this way. Our school, however, wasn't actually on School Street. It was actually on Sacramento Avenue, with only its playground being on School Street. What have I said about kids being stupid? Going south beyond School Street, Albany ends after a block at Belmont Avenue with this chain link fence that is still very much how I remember it was 40 years ago. That property is owned by Henry Freck Sons, a business that has been there since 1884. Beyond the property is the main Union Pacific line I mentioned earlier, and the Kennedy Expressway beyond that to the south. But for 7-year-old me, this is where the sidewalk ends. So over on Sacramento was our grammar school, and for some reason people in Chicago refer to K through 8 schools as grammar schools. I don't know why that is. It's Linnaeus Elementary School. It was named for Carl von Linné, also known as Carl Linnaeus. Linné was a famed Swedish botanist during the 1700s. He is widely regarded as the founder of modern ecology. I hated school when I was growing up. School typically can only go as fast as the slowest student, and I wanted to go much faster than that. So usually I got in trouble because I was so bored. I remember telling my mom that my teachers weren't that smart, that they were only smart because they had the answer key. Kids are stupid. To the north of school, on Sacramento, one of those buildings over there was the Bat House. Maybe I'll eventually do a video about it, but today is not that day. Now, being the latchkey kids that we were required to take our keys with us to school. And being the dumb kids that we would occasionally forget to bring said keys. This wasn't an issue for us, as we would just leave the porch window unlocked, open it whenever we forgot our keys, and I would climb inside and then open the door and let my brother in. No biggie. We were resourceful kids. Growing up, my parents didn't have a lot of money, especially when we were younger. I'd say by the time we got to high school, we had clawed our way into the middle class. The lower end of the middle class, but the middle class nonetheless. Despite of this, our parents wanted to take us to Disney World in Florida. So to this end, they were saving what little money they could, mostly their spare change. And they had saved up quite a bit and were probably a year away from taking us to see Mickey. Remember how I just told you our method for getting in the house when we forgot our keys? Well, someone must have seen us do that enough times to know that we didn't lock our front window that was facing the porch. We came home one night to discover that we had been burglarized. And all that money my parents had been saving to take us to Disney? Gone. Oh, they also stole my dad's high school class ring, but left my mom's engagement ring sitting in the middle of their bed. So the thieves saw it and decided it wasn't worth taking. This always annoyed my dad. Now that I'm older, though, I realize how stupid class rings are and how cheap my mom's engagement ring must have been. But I also believe now that engagement rings are pretty dumb too. The fallout from this burglary was that our trip to Florida was put on hold indefinitely. It took my parents another 7 years to save up the money to finally take us to Disney World in '89. And we brought along my grandma. My mom's mom, not Grandma Fricker. I now think this was to help defer some of the costs, as Grandma would definitely have helped pay for the hotel and rental car. 7 years, folks. That's a long time to wait for something. We just didn't take vacations while my brother and I were growing up. And the ones we did take were usually the long weekend variety. I don't ever recall taking a vacation longer than a week. I racked my brain trying to think of all the trips we took when I was a kid. We did go on a long road trip when I was really little through the South to a lot of Civil War battlefields because, like I said, my father was a big military historian. We went to Chattanooga and Chickamauga, but we also stopped at Mammoth Cave, my first visit to a national park. I'm trying to get to all the national parks. 42 down, 21 to go. I remember very little from that southern road trip. I was very young. We sometimes took long weekend trips to the Dells. That's the Wisconsin Dells for those outside of Wisconsin or Illinois. Or sometimes we go to Devil's Lake, which is near the Dells. Devil's Lake is pretty cool. It's an endoheric lake, meaning it has no surface outflows. It wasn't until I was editing this video that I realized I had mispronounced the word Endoriic. So I apologize for that flub. There's these beautiful bluffs that surround most of the lake, and it offers some great hiking. Somebody in decent physical shape can easily circumnavigate the lake in an afternoon. It's a very nice hike. When I got older, I would go back to Devil's Lake on occasion to do some rock climbing with friends. We also took a long weekend trip to Boston once. Twice we drove out to my dad's friends in Nebraska. My brother and I flew to Oklahoma once to visit our cousin, but that was without our parents. We went to Indiana Beach one year. It's an old amusement park on Lake Schaefer in Indiana. It's been there since 1926. There is more than corn in Indiana.
Now listen up. This is Indiana. This is corn. And this is Indiana Beach.
There's more than corn in Indiana, and right within your reach, it's Indiana Beach.
Once we went to Vegas. Now Vegas wasn't as kid-friendly as it is today, and it wasn't a whole lot of fun for me in 1988 as a 13-year-old. When my mom's family eventually moved to Tucson, that's both of her sisters and her mom, we took a few road trips out there. Those trips began my fascination with White Sands, New Mexico, which is now a national park. It was only a national monument at the time. I think I've been there about 6 times now. I spent 2 weeks alone in Iowa before my senior year of high school, but that was hardly a vacation. I was attending the University of Iowa's summer wrestling camp hosted by Dan Gable. They kicked my ass for 2 weeks. But every night they'd finally let us rest and relax, and they'd usually have some activity we could participate in. It was kind of funny because one night they were showing Field of Dreams, which of course mostly takes place in Iowa. Well, I had met a girl while I was there. She was there for a volleyball camp. Her name was Alicia. Not a very common name. In Field of Dreams, the older version of Moonlight Graham is talking with Ray, played by Kevin Costner, and he says, well, I'll just let you hear it from the great Burt Lancaster himself.
I better be getting home. Alicia will think I got a girlfriend.
Really? Oh, when my parents came to pick me up, we did some sightseeing on the way back to Chicago. One of the places we stopped was Dyersville, Iowa, the home of the actual Field of Dreams.
Hey, Dad? You want to have catch? I'd like that.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
There's no crying in baseball!
I'm a huge baseball fan, or at least I used to be. I don't watch much sports these days. I got to see all my city's sports teams win a championship in my lifetime. I figure that's enough. I can die a happy man. I can't really ask for more. And I mean, we got to see Michael Jordan in his prime. We were very spoiled. But those were all the vacations I remember as a child, and I'm grateful for all those trips. I know there are plenty of people out there who don't get to go on vacation at all. But they're all great memories, and they were fun times. And we finally did make it to Orlando during the spring break of 1989. We did a lot of the touristy stuff in and around Orlando, but the main reason we were there was to pay homage to the mouse at his house. We got the 3-day park hopper pass, and we went to the Magic Kingdom one day and Epcot the next. Those were the only 2 parks back then, the Magic Kingdom and Epcot. MGM Studios, now Disney's Hollywood Studios, wouldn't open until later that year. But it was great, and I loved Epcot way more than I liked the Magic Kingdom. We did one day at Universal Studios as well, and another day we went over to Wet n Wild. I got so sunburnt that the skin on my face was like leather. It was terribly painful, so much so that the rest of my family went back to the Magic Kingdom while I stayed back at the hotel with aloe vera slathered on my face. The day before we went to Wet n Wild, however, we went over to the east coast of Florida, specifically the Kennedy Space Center, or KSC, not the Colonel's soggy KFC chicken. We went to the Visitor Center there, and we did the tour. Now, I can't imagine that the Visitor Center and tour back then come close to how awesome it is today. I mean, they have a retired orbiter there. But it still left a very huge impression on a math and science loving kid. So much so that when I left there, I told myself that one day I would work here. And 10 years later, I did. I went and got a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and in 1999, I went to work at the Kennedy Space Center as an avionics engineer on the Space Shuttle main engines for Boeing Rocketdyne. I spent most of the next decade there launching people into space. We spent a lot of those missions building the International Space Station. Pretty cool. Dream fulfilled. It's curious how one minor event can have a huge impact upon your life. Had we not been robbed, we'd have gone on our Disney trip much sooner, and I would have been much younger. Hell, my parents might not have even taken us over to the Space Center. And if they had, would it have had the same impression on me? I don't know. I'm sure the younger me would have enjoyed the Magic Kingdom much more. Maybe I would have become an animator. No, just kidding, I can't draw. But I think it illustrates how the entire trajectory of your life can change in an instant. If only my brother and I hadn't been so stupid. Being alive, well, it's just illogical anyway. I've been fortunate enough to have had some interesting jobs in my life. I'm just going to list most of them. They're all quite different from one another. These were all the jobs in my life where I was actually paid. Well, except for 2. But I'm listing those because I did spend a significant portion of time in those 2 positions. Let's see. I've been a babysitter, an envelope stuffer, a lifeguard, a corn dog vendor, a painter, walls not canvases, a disc jockey, radio station, not spinning in a club, a music director, a gas station attendant, and an exotic dancer. A singing telegramist, a stucco helper, a house sitter, gutter cleaner, dock worker, that's loading dock, not on the wharf, a department store associate, a flight test engineer, a singer harmonica player, an avionics engineer for both Boeing Rocketdyne and NASA, a software engineer, and the owner of my own software company. I've had a long and interesting career, but I've been working for almost 30 years at this point. I know I spent most of this episode railing about how kids are stupid. They really aren't. It's just something funny to say. But they really are not stupid. They just don't know any better. They're young and they're trying to figure stuff out. Let them fail. It's the best way for them to learn. Who knows? Maybe they'll grow up one day and become a rocket scientist as a result of something stupid they did when they were 7. Well, that's it for this episode. Remember how I said I had a 3-day park hopper pass at Disney? Well, I didn't go that last day because, well, I was burnt to a crisp. I still have that pass with that unused day. It has no expiration date. Oh, I'm going back there one day, and I'm going to demand that the mouse grant me entrance to his magic kingdom. I'm just waiting for the ticket price to be about $1,000. And with this current inflation, it should only take a year or 2. Well, until next time, bye. The purpose of me making these videos was to inform my kids about my well-lived life. It is also to give them something to go back and remember me whenever I should depart this mortal coil. Videos, especially ones in high definition or higher, are very large files. Thus hosting them can be costly. YouTube will let you do it for free. The trade-off is they may stick some ads in there. But if you just happen to stumble upon my videos or channels and you happen to enjoy them as well, that means a lot to me. I do want to be entertaining. I love telling the stories from my life. Most people seem to get some enjoyment from them. I've also done a lot of stuff over the years, and some of that stuff, I feel, is pretty unbelievable. So if you are enjoying these stories, I've set up a Patreon page where you can kick a few shekels my way if you're feeling so bold. And if you don't, that's cool too. Keep enjoying the videos. I'm also told you're supposed to like and subscribe. I really don't care. But those buttons are there. Feel free to use them if you'd like. Here's the URL for the Patreon page that I've set up. Thank you for watching.
Skibbity, skibbity, skibbity. That's all, folks.